Hello, and welcome back to the world of Wysteria. And we will now continue with part 2 of chapter 28. Will laid his head down beside hers and closed his eyes. Relaxing his body and putting aside all thoughts, he surrendered himself to the music of the falling water. As he drifted into a tranquil, meditative state, a melody emerged from the complex harmony of sounds. A faint song, her song. He slowly opened his eyes, giving them a moment to adjust to the light, then lifted his head. There, in the large pool at the base of the falls, he beheld the river goddess, waist deep in the water, singing to herself, apparently unaware of their presence. "Emily," he whispered quietly, gently nudging her with his arm. "She's here." Emily raised her head from its sandy pillow and, unable to contain herself, let out a faint gasp. The lovely nymph looked their way, but showed no alarm. Sending them a smile, she continued her song, while the couple looked on and listened, spellbound, until she had finished. Then, with her hands caressing the water, the young goddess slowly began to spin, her diaphanous gown trailing behind her, circling her delicate frame. With each turn, she sank deeper into the pool, dissolving back into her elemental form. As the water reached her shoulders, she raised her arms to the sky, closed her eyes, and slipped from sight, leaving behind a spiraling wake. "Alicia," Will pronounced softly. "What?" said Emily, as if suddenly shaken from a dream. "Her name is Alicia." As if called, the naiad reappeared, surfacing in the churning water directly beneath the falls. Through the glistening shower that fell around her, she gazed at Will, a loving smile upon her lips. His heart trembled as he met her stare, and his eyes welled with tears. She then lifted her arms, but rather than sinking back into the water, she rose from the pool. Her body grew larger, slowly stretching upward into the descending torrent, merging with the tower of water, while the long train of her blue gown flowed downstream with the rapids, rippling over the rocks like fine silk fluttering in the breeze. Standing high above the canyon floor, the colossal goddess now grew in radiance, bathing the valley in soft blue light. The shining figure then erupted into a spray of crystalline droplets, which tumbled down into the pool. For several minutes, Will and Emily sat on the sand, speechless, rapt by what they just witnessed. "Look," Emily whispered. Seeing nothing in the water in front of him, Will glanced at her and followed her eyes to the sky, where a rainbow now hung, bridging the two banks of the ravine. It was much brighter and deeper in color than any rainbow he'd seen before, and its position seemed incorrect, much higher than it should be, nearly overhead, and not exactly opposite the sun. A sign, he wondered, or perhaps just a gift. "A message," he heard a soft voice say. "Did you hear that?" he asked Emily. "Hear what?" she asked. Before he could answer, Will felt a tremendous thud in his chest, and a chill ran down his spine. "What's wrong?" she asked, seeing the abrupt change in his expression. "Is someone here?" Will strained to decipher what he felt. "Yes," he said, "but it's more than that." "Is it trouble?" "I'm afraid it might be. You should leave, Emily." "Well, maybe I should," she replied, smiling at him. "But we both know better." "Listen, darling, you were almost caught last time," he reminded her. "In fact, you were caught." "I wasn't in any real danger," she said dismissively. "If I hadn't gotten away from that Anton character—" "But you did, didn't you?" she broke in. "And we're much better prepared now. If these intruders are the unfriendly type, it's they who should be worried." Will saw she wasn't going to be persuaded. "Fine," he said, reluctantly. "But if there is trouble—" "Then we'll just have another exciting story to tell," she said, hijacking his sentence. "So, how should we get back up?" Emily asked him, staring up at the rim of the canyon. She could skip to the top, and he could leap, but Will preferred that they stay together. Knowing neither who had entered his world, nor what their intentions might be, he didn't want to leave her alone, even for a few moments. "I could carry you," he suggested. "Why don't we try tunneling first?" she proposed. "And if that doesn't work, you can give me a ride." "Okay," he said, "but just one attempt. Then we'll fly." Emily took his hand and began preparing herself. "I'm going to aim for the spot where we were sitting," she said. Will nodded. Then he closed his eyes, took several slow breaths, and told her he was ready. Once again, he felt Emily's tug and saw the blackness close in around him. But still, some part of him stubbornly refused to surrender its tie to Wysteria. Convinced it was useless, Will was about to give up when he heard a voice, the voice of a goddess. "Do not be afraid, my dear one," she said, her soothing words flowing through him like warm honey. "You may let go. You may release this place without fear of its loss. For however far you venture from this world, and however long your absence, it will be here when you return, as will I. This I promise you. This you can believe." Will felt the unconditional trust of an infant cradled in its mother's arms. And in that moment, he understood the source of his resistance. He saw, buried deep in his mind, that kernel of doubt, that primal fear of separation. Separation from himself. And he was able to let go. His mortal frame fell away, and Emily led him into the welcoming darkness. There was a brief sensation of movement, the same sense of moving in every direction at once he'd experienced on his trip to Jeremy's world, followed by a moment of stillness. the empty blackness around him gave way to light, which quickly condensed into colors and shapes. And as his body once again clothed his mind, Will found himself standing on firm, green turf, facing the castle. "You did it," Emily cried, releasing his hand. "We traveled." "Yes," he murmured, not yet feeling fully himself. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I'm fine," he told her. "I just need a moment to wake up." "I understand," she said. "The more you do it, the faster you'll recover from the trip." It was a significant accomplishment. They had traveled together. Unfortunately, Will had little time to revel in their success. For once his head had cleared, he quickly remembered why they'd left the valley in such haste. "So, how did you do it?" Emily asked eagerly. "It felt like you were stuck again. Then, all of a sudden, off we went. Did you try something different? Or..." "Just a second," he said, taking her hand protectively as he scanned the area around them. Will saw no one, nor did he sense anything threatening nearby. But there was a foreign presence in Wysteria, a strong presence, an insidious presence. "I was stuck, just like before," he said, addressing Emily's question, satisfied that there was no immediate danger. "And then she spoke to me." "The Naiad?" "Yes." "What did she say to you? Did she help you break away?" Will looked at Emily with an apologetic smile. "We should probably start moving," he said. "I have to find out who's here and what's going on. We can talk about it on the way, okay?" "Of course," she replied. "Where are we heading?" "There's someone in the town, at least somewhere in that direction," he said. "It's hard to pinpoint the source. I'm getting mixed signals. It's like listening to a radio that keeps jumping from one channel to another. I'm guessing there are several different sources." "Do you mean there's more than one person here?" she asked. "I don't know," he said, "but that could be what I'm feeling. More bounty hunters, maybe?" "Maybe," said Will. "We'll find out soon enough." Will started to lead Emily across the grounds, but she stopped him. "Do you want to try traveling there?" she asked. "It would be quicker." That hadn't occurred to Will. It was an interesting idea, and they were in a hurry. "I suppose it would be," he replied, after a moment's reflection. "But I only have a vague sense of where the intruders are. I don't want them to see us coming, and they may be watching for us. I'm not sure how close to the town we could land and still be safely out of range. And remember," he added, "it took me some time to recover from our trip. I don't want to face whatever it is while I'm half asleep." "I see your point," said Emily. "It was just a thought." "And a perfectly good one," he returned. "Any other time. But right now, we need to be careful. Both of us. Understand?" Emily nodded. "Don't worry. I'll be good." And Will smiled and kissed her forehead. "Let's get going," he said. "The sooner we get this over with, the sooner we can properly celebrate our maiden voyage." And that concludes chapter 28. And we will return very shortly with chapter 29.